Director Ingmar Bergman began his career in the 1940s and is still at work today. In the mid-50s, the Swedish filmmaker really found his form, with a string of hits including Smiles of a Summer Night, The Seventh Seal and Wild Strawberries propelling him to the forefront of international cinema. It was around this time that Woody Allen discovered Bergman, his rigorous, beautiful explorations of faith, philosophy and death making a profound connection with the emergent comedian and future filmmaker. This is one of the most famous cases of one filmmaker publicly supporting the work of another. I spoke to Woody Allen about his long-standing and deeply felt admiration for Ingmar Bergman. Ingmar Bergman's films obviously had a profound effect on you. Why should a modern audience be excited by them, and can you remember the circumstances under which you first saw them?
I was a late teenager, and I saw Summer with Monika and The Naked Night, and they were just clearly superior to other people's movies. The fact that he's got a mind and an intellect, and the films are about something, and they're substantive, and they're philosophical, and that they're profound on a human level, that's all great, but he's first and foremost an entertainer, so it's not like doing homework. It's not like going to see some film that you hear is great, and you watch it and you figure, well, yes, it is great, but I was bored stiff, and I'm sure it's great, but it's all this talky, boring stuff, and, you know, not at all.
Fan i mig, är det mitt träd de tänker såga ner? Vad är det din förpuppare taskfrans? Vad tänker du göra med mitt träd, va? Kan du inte svara åtminstone hövlighet kostar så lite? Vem är du egentligen? Jag sågar ner i träd. Eftersom din tid är ute. Det går inte, jag har inte tid. Har du inte tid? Nej, jag har min föreställning. Ja, den är inställd. På grund av dödsfall. Men min kontrakt? Det är uppsagt.
And what sort of films were you seeing at the time? Were there lots of European films, or was it mainly American cinema?
I grew up in a very provincial neighborhood, and there was still a good amount of European movies showing. When you came into Manhattan, which was a much more sophisticated borough than Brooklyn, there were a tremendous amount of European films being shown. And, you know, French, not just European, but Asian. You saw the Kurosawa films, Asian films and French films, and some German films, Italian films, of course, and Swedish. And to me personally, you know, I made an immediate personal connection with his films, or his films made them with me.
Smultronstället. Det är möjligt att jag blev lite sentimental. Det kan ju hända att jag blev lite trött och kände mig en aning vemodig. Det är inte otroligt att jag kom att tänka på ett eller annat som varit förknippat med barndomens lekplatser. Jag vet inte hur det inträffade, men dagens klara verklighet gled över i minnets ännu klarare bilder som steg framför mitt öga med styrkan av ett verkligt skeende.
Critics have noted that you've dealt with Bergman-esque themes in films like Love and Death and Crimes and Misdemeanors and Shadows and Fog. Do you think your films are stylistically connected, or is the connection thematic?
I think a thematic similarity, but that's probably why I was attracted to him in the first place, because those questions were more interesting to me. I mean, if you take social filmmakers, let's say take a filmmaker like Oliver Stone, who does these wonderful films about Nixon, about the Kennedy assassination, about you know, about events of you know, Vietnam, events of social potency. That's what interests him, and he makes these films about them. To me, the philosophical questions, the existential questions, the religious questions were more interesting to me personally. And so I'm sure I've been influenced specifically by him, just as one writer gets influenced by another writer. But I'm sure I would have been dealing with those same issues in my, I think much less competent way, regardless of whether he had existed or not.
Perhaps Bergman's most famous film is The Seventh Seal, with this legendary representation of death, which you've parodied in movies like Love and Death. What is it about The Seventh Seal that has made it the archetypal movie about death?
It's the ultimate subject matter. I mean, it doesn't get any more deep than man's confrontation with, is there a God, is there no God? If there's no God, how do we live and what do we do, and why isn't everything so terrifying that you're paralyzed? And all of these questions that are much beyond social issues in terms of their unanswerable profundity.
Jag vill ha vetskap. Inte tro, inte antaganden, utan vetskap. Jag vill att Gud räcker mig sin hand, avtäcker sitt ansikte och talar till mig.
Men han tiger.
Jag ropar till honom i mörkret. Men ibland är det som det inte fanns någon där.
Det kanske inte finns någon där.
Men då är levandet en orimlig fasa.
Here he explores these questions and dramatizes some of the best thinkers on the subject, and does it with enormous theatricality.
Villkoret är att jag får leva så länge jag står dig emot. Spelar jag dig matt, förger du mig.
The minute the film starts, you never take a breath till it's over.
Du fick svart.
Det passar ju bäst så, inte sant?
What about a film like Cries and Whispers, which on the surface is dealing with incredibly morbid subject matter and yet manages to be life-affirming?
Well, for the same reason that, when a great master like Chekhov or someone, or any tragedian, whether it's Euripides or Death of a Salesman, when they make these films, you don't come away depressed. You come away with an exhilarating feeling because you're in the presence of great art.
Vad läser du? Jag läser i Agnes dagbok.
Vad då?
Torsdag den 30 september. Så här står det. Jag har fått den bästa gåvan en människa kan få i det här livet. Gåvan har många namn. Samhörighet, gemenskap, mänsklig närhet, ömhet. Jag tror att det är detta som kallas nåd. Jag rör inte vid mig. Kom inte nära mig. Jag avskyr alla sorters beröringar.
And the film was the way it was shot, it was hypnotic. The choice of color and the choice to do the subject matter poetically. He's really a poet. The camera just moves slowly in and out of those rooms, and the clocks tick, and you're just hypnotized by the movie and the events that occur. And when it's over, even though much of it has been very down, grisly, negative material, his vision of it is so good because he's a genius that he imbues that material with a quality that makes you come away exhilarated because you've been in the presence of fulfilling art rather than just a depressing experience.
When people think of the archetypal Bergman shot, they think of a lingering close-up. What was it about his use of the close-up that enabled him to get right inside the heads of his characters?
If you're Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton making a film and you've got a runaway train or cowboy movie with 1,000 cows stampeding, or gangster movies where people are shooting guns and running and diving behind crates, that's one thing. But when the conflict is in one person, within one person, where that person is tortured as to whether they can express their feelings to another person, and you've got all, and these conflicts are just as dramatic and just as high intensity as all the others I've mentioned, but they're not as visual. They don't lend themselves to the same visual treatment. Instinctively, he developed a filmic vocabulary to express all these inner states of anxiety in a way that made them kinetic for the viewer.
I remember very clearly in the early 1970s going to see Love and Death and then being led by it to go and seek out The Seventh Seal. Do you think that your films have led audiences to Bergman's work?
Bergman was a titan before I came on the scene, and my films, I just can't imagine, maybe one out of a zillion people, but I can't imagine it having any significant or even remotely significant impact on people seeing his films. I think that I have had some impact in that I was in New York City a very, very early devotee of Bergman's. I latched onto him in a very, very passionate way.
What about on a personal level? Have you met Bergman, and what was he like?
He's like every other good filmmaker I spoke to. He speaks about, in regular street terms, of workman's terms, of working on films and the problems he has and the problems with the audiences and the producers and the difficulties and the grosses and why it doesn't do well here and does well someplace else, and his problem in shooting something. And the same conversation that I've had with other film directors, or that I would have with somebody. I mean, it was not suddenly, going to visit Fu Manchu and a gong is rung and somebody comes out in a black robe and you discuss these profound, silent movies about inability of people to communicate or find meaning in life. It's not that at all. He's, very lively, charming, vital person.
People think of Bergman's films as being about death and angst, but there are comic films such as Smiles of a Summer Night. Did that interest you?
If I want comedy, I can find better many places. Even Smiles of a Summer Night, his so-called comic masterpiece film, is a very charming film and has a warmth to it, but it's not my favorite of his films.
Låt bli att gå sådär.
Vad menar du, unga hen?
Det jag säger, låt bli att gå på det där sättet.
Hur då?
Petra svänger ju med stjärten.
Ja, så gör jag. Titta, det gör jag. Så lustigt.
What I favor about Bergman is the bleak, deep, dark abysses that he traveled in with his films, the bleak landscapes and the dark themes. And there's where I think he really made his reputation and made history.
Vad ska jag föreställa?
Det är dödsdansen.
Det är döden.
Ja, han dansar iväg med dem allihop.
Varför håller du på med sådana klåderier?
Jag tänkte man skulle påminna folk om det faktum att de ska dö.
Jag blir inte gladare av det.
The Film 4 season has an overview of Bergman's entire career. For a novice coming to Bergman for the first time, which ones should a viewer seek out and why?
I would pick out The Seventh Seal and Wild Strawberries and Cries and Whispers for sure. Those three for sure. And if I was picking a fourth one, they'd probably like The Magician.
Mitt herrskap, vi tackar för ett bifall och vi hoppas på små konststycken verkligen behagar er.
I've spoken to people that saw The Magician years ago and had no idea what the picture was representing, none whatsoever. And they would say to me, you know, oh, well, I don't know what it was. I think he was just having a good time, but gosh, it was so gripping. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat.
And finally, if you had to pick one, what is it?
Oh, The Seventh Seal.
That's your favourite?
The Seventh Seal, yes. I think The Seventh Seal would be on my list of 10 best movies of all time, you know, from all directors.
Woody Allen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jag har glömt hur pjäserna stod.
Men jag har inte glömt.